Welcome, everyone. This is our sacred community, and you are joining our Inspire, Innovate, Ignite panel discussions. And tonight's topic, or today's topic, is being vulnerable with yourself and others to gain inner and outer freedom with our wonderful facilitator, Reshma. And Reshma, I am not going to pronounce your last name. Can you please pronounce your last name? I don't want to demolish it.
Sure, it's Bhojwani.
Thank you. And I'd like to just give Reshma a beautiful introduction here. We are a community of men and women who are on a mission to empower people around the world. And this is what our sacred community does. We are a group of various holistic and spiritual entrepreneurs, as well as teachers, and we host a variety of different tribes to empower men and women. So Reshma is going to be our wonderful facilitator here, and I'd like you to get to know her a little bit. Reshma empowers free-spirited women to flourish with freedom and feel fulfilled in their life, bring back belief, faith, trust within themselves, and gain clarity, courage, and confidence in deciding to pursue the life they deserve and desire on their terms, not worrying about societal and cultural expectations. So I'm so excited to hear this topic with you, Reshma, so I'm going to hand it on over to you.
Thank you, Josette. And thank you all for joining my panel discussion. We'll start with a quick introduction of each panelist, and then we'll have our conversation. So Alyson Williams is an empowerment strategist and self-love advocate whose passion is to empower women to love themselves and live a life they love on their own terms. From baby steps to self-reliance, she uses all the tools in her toolkit to facilitate her clients' journeys towards creating and sustaining the life they desire. Katerina Lenarcic connects with the universal life force and uses it to help people integrate their wisdom and knowledge into their everyday life. She has been on her personal awakening journey for over 28 years and has developed skills and tools to help humanity's consciousness lift its vibration into a higher understanding. Pamela Cummins is an expert dream interpreter and spiritual growth coach. She helps her clients and students understand their dream meanings and accelerate their personal and spiritual growth. Pamela is also the author of 7 books and the creator of 4 oracle decks. And Roger Burnley is an intuitive empowerment life purpose coach, a sage, a mystic, and a spiritual channel. He began his coaching career in voice and performance more than 35 years ago and brings his wealth of experience and knowledge to all of his work. He has dedicated his life to aiding others in becoming the best version of themselves as empowered people. So welcome all. And so let's start with the first question, which is, we'll start with the fundamentals. What does being vulnerable mean to you and in your opinion, is it a strength or a weakness? So let's start with Alyson.
Thanks, Reshma. Firstly, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel with these wonderful people, some of whom I know already. So to me, vulnerable is having the courage and the willingness to own your, I don't like to say weaknesses, so I'm going to say your challenges, the things that really stretch you, the things that create some resistance in you, the things that make you go, that scare you. And often it's our vulnerabilities that it's through our acknowledging our vulnerabilities that we actually find what we're really capable of. So to me, a vulnerability is something that it's not something you're necessarily good at. In fact, it's often the opposite, where it's something that you're not comfortable with, or something that you might perceive as a weakness, but in fact, it's a beautiful part of you, and you need to own all of you, or we need to own all of ourselves to be fully whole. And owning our vulnerability makes us that much more able to live a life in alignment and a life on our terms. And with the work that I do with my clients and with my own journey, really just stepping into my vulnerability with purpose, knowing that the vulnerability is there for a reason. It's there to teach me something. It's there to help me live my life at a higher level. That's really what I feel about vulnerability. And as far as that's my vulnerability that I'm happy to put out there. But the other thing with vulnerability is I think it's also the willingness to allow others to be vulnerable, because I'm one of these people who's a rescuer and I want to help everybody. And so if somebody is experiencing some kind of challenge, my instinct, especially somebody close to me, is to rush in and help them. But that's not what it's all about. It's about allowing each of us to embrace our vulnerability so that we can grow, and giving others the space to do the same.
Thank you so much. How about you, Katerina? What does vulnerability mean to you, and is it a strength or a weakness?
Well, hi, thanks for having me here with you. I think it's a strengthness, like it's a strength, because just adding on to what Alyson said, vulnerability gives us the opportunity to find out what we don't like so we can bring in the new stuff, and also give us the courage to speak our truth when we're feeling challenged or not feeling so aligned. Because when we're not aligned, it means that we need to do some work and find out why we're feeling challenged. Vulnerability, I feel, is a treasure within the shadow, because it helps us to find out more about ourselves. Being vulnerable also, is to go and do your Facebook lives and get in front of everybody and talk about how you're truly feeling at that given moment, because everybody, I feel, wants to see us walk our talk. So vulnerability helps us to gain the skills and the courage to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pamela, how about you?
Well, thanks for having me on here for this. This is a really powerful topic. And to me, vulnerability, for the most part, is it's positive. And it's being, I want to say it's being real, but it's being human, because so many of us think we need to be perfect, and we don't. We just need to be who we are and ourselves, and we're going to mess up, and I'm going to get my words twisted, being live speaking. I might say something that, oh, why did I say that? I had someone who used to say, it's what you're going to say, what you do say, and what you should have said. Okay. But being vulnerable is being me. Now, the only time I see it as a weakness is when you share your vulnerability with someone who isn't safe. Okay. And who's going to make fun of you and use it against you. So for me to be vulnerable, I need to be with somebody, with the right people. And I also say that with my clients, don't be with somebody who's going to put you down all the time when you're yourself. So that's all that's coming to mind right now. So thanks. Be vulnerable with the right people.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Roger, how about you? What does being vulnerable mean to you? And is it a strength or a weakness?
It's a strength, because it means becoming willing to move into the next level of who you're meant to become, which we all have. And we're never done with that. It's something that continues on. And we do that in our consciousness. And it's so interesting, the synchronicity of this. I did a channeling session this morning because I knew it was a new moon, and I had planned this a while ago. And I called it, the new moon will reveal your life purpose. Because it's always going on, it's always coming up, but we have to be the ones willing to move into that. And talking about doing a channeling session, that's something that I would have never done a couple years ago. See, because that I had all these other careers that I did, and they kept moving me. Okay, now there's something else. There's the next place you're meant to go to. And so for every person, they have that path, but it's that vulnerability that gets in the way. We're going to be afraid we're going to make a mistake, or someone's going to judge us, or whatever it might be. But being vulnerable means that you're willing to take that next step into who you are, fulfilling that potential, that thing that we always hear about. You haven't fulfilled your potential. It's always there. That's what we're doing. So,
Right.
thanks.
Right. Thank you for that. So then why is it so difficult for people to be vulnerable with themselves and accept the truth versus avoiding dealing with their life situation? So Roger, let's just continue with you.
We all, and this is part of what came through in the session, we all have our evolutionary paths that we're meant to follow. And we come into the world with limitations and blockages, and they're going to be different for each person, but we all have them. There's no soul, no human that's born that doesn't have those things that they're meant to move through, but they're unique to us. And so if we look around and we're comparing ourselves to someone else, that's the first problem that we have, because now we're making ourselves like weird or different or less than someone else. That's never true. So it's about being willing to feel our way there by what causes us to feel good. What choices are we making? How can we improve who we are, our lives? And then we start to understand that it's all about consciousness, and it's something that we each do individually, and we do it when we become willing, when it's right, the right time for us in our lives, and that's very individual. But I started doing this because I knew the world was changing several years ago. I said, oh, the world is changing, so now people need to embody who they are, because that's the energy of light and love that we can put into the world and help shift things. That's why we've had all the chaos and the craziness going on, but that's also the reason that we're all here, is to help that become better.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Pamela, what about you? What are your thoughts about why is it so difficult for people to be vulnerable?
What comes to mind is that they don't want to be shamed and embarrassed. I mean, look at what people do on the internet. People can be really cruel, okay, with the trolls and putting you down, and you're, you know, like when I went gray, okay, I went cold turkey. Oh my God, I was vulnerable, and some people were really cruel, while other people were really behind me. You go, girl. So it's, you know, it's like opening up, going around with your heart chakra or your heart open and waiting for pain. Okay. And then the other thing is, being vulnerable is having to look at yourself. And I know some of my clients, I've actually had where, you know, we know that as healers and dream interpreters and psychics, we guide people along, right? And I've had clients who just didn't want to deal with being vulnerable and deal with the pain, said, you do it, Pamela, you take it, you do it for me. And I can't do it. So it's scary. It's, you know, it's scary, but when you walk through that fear, there's so much rewards from it, you know, but it's one step at a time, and it's being real, and on a planet that doesn't really want you to be real. I hope that makes sense. I see people shaking their heads. So. Yes,
total sense. My first marriage was an arranged marriage, and I had gray hair, salt and pepper since a very childhood. So I was 27, and my parents made me color my hair because a bride cannot have gray hair. So they literally made me go and color my hair just so that I look like a normal traditional bride.
Yeah, so, like everybody, box number 10, yeah, right?
Yeah. Right. And I didn't care about having salt and pepper hair. And then after that, because I colored it, I had to maintain it, and all these years. I mean, I know I could stop, but you know what I'm saying? It just started something that wasn't of my interest. It was because the culture and society forced it onto me.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Katerina, what about you? Why is it difficult for people to be vulnerable, in your opinion? And why is it so difficult for them to accept it versus denying it is easier?
Well, they're really good questions, right? Because from birth, we get told what to do and what we can't do, how we're going to do it, how you're going to say it, what you got to wear, what you got to do. And if you choose to be different, you get treated, you get teased and all those things. So I feel that as a space holder, I give my clients, we've got to give our clients a space where they feel comfortable in being vulnerable. So I always tell my clients, if you feel like crying, you cry. If you feel like yelling, you yell. If you feel like you need to sit quietly for 10 minutes, that's what you do. So it's really giving them permission to be vulnerable. Like we need to give ourselves permission to be vulnerable because of all the status quo and and what our schools do and so on. Vulnerability is difficult because the world was not made for us to show us, to be your true self, to show who we really are because of all the chaos and the limitations that are placed on us. And that's done deliberately to not shine our light, right? So what's happening now is we're giving people this, I give people a loving space so they can find out who they truly are. Even the ugliness of who you are, you need to face that too. So I go a little bit further in, I introduce you to your shadow and we create a friendship with our shadow. So when you are having a challenging moment, you're not pushing that challenging moment under the carpet or out the door. And I always, what I do is I sit with my shadow and say, well, what is it that we can do today to bring out the best of me and what can I give you as a purpose? Because the ego needs a purpose to do something. So if we give it permission to help us, then we become more ease and grace. We become vulnerable. And then in turn, what happens is we grow up in our maturity to accept who we are. And then we become more vulnerable and walk our talk. So that's what comes to mind. That's how I help my clients, but that's how I help myself too. So we got to walk our talk. So if we're going to be vulnerable, then I need to be vulnerable. So yeah, I sit with my shadow and we have a brilliant little conversation. And I'm finding that my nervous system is calming down. So as my nervous system is coming down, my ego is coming down, and it doesn't want to prove me wrong or right or whatever, right? It's deciding that it's going to help me move forward with much ease and grace. And that's the idea, right? And why can't we do this? Because when somebody judges us, all we want to do is crawl into a little, go and hide because somebody's making judgments. So I feel those who make judgments are just projecting themselves onto you because you're actually being vulnerable and you're actually being, your true self, and they're afraid of it. But once again, that's how the world was created. So you are afraid of who you are, because once you find out who you are and become vulnerable and speak your truth, the shadow can't hurt you anymore. So that's the point, isn't it?
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful. Yes,
Thank you.
very true. Right. And how about you, Alyson? Why do you feel it is so difficult for people to be vulnerable with themselves and accept their life situation versus avoiding it or being in denial?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of gold in what people have shared already. A lot of what Katerina was saying as well, that, society has programmed us for control, because when, when the powers that be can kind of control the masses, then there's order, and it's all about power and control. I know this might sound a bit conspiratorial, but it's not meant to be. And we have lived so long in this very 3D patriarchal world of law and order, etc. So we've denied our feminine energy, and men and women have feminine energy. It's not a gender thing, but we've gone for the control. So we've gone with our kind of right brain instead, which is all about control and order, and we've dulled our left brain, which is about loving and caring and looking after each other, as well as being our true selves, as Katerina was saying. So, you know, the shadow, the ego, all of that sort of stuff is, again, how we've been programmed. We've been programmed to bring all that to the fore, and we've been programmed to sort of shut down our heart-centered space. And all of us here are heart-centered beings who want to bring more of this love, light, and energy into the world with our clients and all the work we do. And I think for so long, people, if not in the family, then it's been at the school, or it's the government, or whatever, various cultures have actually tried to keep us down, because if we rise to be our full selves, then we are going to threaten, you know, the establishment. And so, and as I'm saying this, I'm sort of thinking, you know, some people listening might think this is kind of a bit over the top, but I believe that the people listening are very much of the same kind of thinking as we all are. It's about, you know, coming to terms with who we are, regardless of what other people say about us, because we've been programmed for shame and blame and guilt and putting people down, because that makes the other person feel good, right? Because if you can criticize someone, then that means that you're better than they are. And that's how we thrive. And so for that reason, a lot of us who want to step out of ourselves don't feel comfortable, because we would be going against the grain, and going against the grain challenges the establishment, and that brings more, it becomes almost like a vicious cycle. So it really needs, and thankfully now I believe the world has now made this shift, and that's why all of us are doing this light work, that the world has now made the shift to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to put all your vulnerabilities out there. But as Pamela so wisely said, you cannot be sharing this with any and everyone, because a lot of people will use this against you. So choose where you are wanting to be vulnerable, and make sure that you're in a safe space. But having said that, it takes a brave soul to step outside. So your Martin Luther Kings, your JFKs, all those people, Ruth Parks, you know, all those people who stepped out to the establishment and said, no, I'm not taking this anymore. I deserve better. We do need to have, you know, someone to step up to change, because if we don't change, nothing. If we don't have people who are willing to put themselves out there for criticism, nothing will change. I mean, this is a conversation that, oh my gosh, I can go on for ages, but I will stop there and pass it over back to you. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, and people are afraid to be misfits in society. I am a black sheep of my house, a rebel, and I'm proud of it. And I seriously feel being a rebel is a strength and not a weakness. But people don't agree with that. And I get into plenty of trouble with my family and society because of the way I think differently from them. But I still do what I want to do, which leads me to gaining freedom. And does vulnerability lead to courage and confidence to live a freedom lifestyle on your own terms? And Alyson and Katerina, both of you mentioned courage. So let's talk a little about vulnerability and courage and confidence and freedom and how they all go together. So let's start with Katerina.
Well, courage, right? We all
Yeah.
we all have it. Even if you don't feel that you've got it, we all have it, right? Because it takes courage to walk out the front door and go into the world and go into your job and leave school and all those things. As a space holder and a light worker and an energy worker, I have to work on my courage every day to be vulnerable so I can come out, right? Because the light worker, and you know, I'll just use that term, the light worker company we've had to unravel and find our courage to speak our truth, because of how the world was created, right? So I'm encouraging you to keep going, right? Keep going, do the unraveling, be vulnerable. Gosh, I don't know how many times I've been on Facebook and cried my little eyes out, you know, all because my guidance has kind of just touched my heart and said, well, you got to do this, right? Because somebody out there is going to find the courage to do it themselves because we're showing it, right? So we got to walk our talk. And being vulnerable is part of that, right? And courage, yes. Courage is within you. So I'm encouraging you to keep unraveling and finding your courage, right? Courage to say, no, this is my boundary. I'm not allowing it. Or courage to say, yes, I'm going to do this, even though I don't have the money or I can't do this right now. Just follow your instincts, right? Courage is a vulnerable tool because it's a God-given gift for us to be able to be who ourselves in a world that's unraveling itself. And when I see others talk and present themselves with courage, it inspires me to keep going as a light worker and energy worker. And believe me, there are things that I have to talk about that's going to take a lot of courage for me to say. But that applies to everybody, right? Whatever your message is, it's going to take your courage to say it. So keep going, say it, learn how to communicate it. Get yourself a mentor, get educated on how to say it, right? Don't be ashamed of who you are, because who you are has that energetic thread that's going to help somebody stand up and dust themselves to move forward. That's what we're doing here, right? Our own examples help somebody else to find the courage to speak their truth so they can help the world. Because we're all asking, how do we help? Well, be your true self. Educate yourself, get a mentor, do all the things and show people around you that your process actually works. And then once they see that your process works, they'll find the courage to do it themselves.
Yes.
And that's what I'm all about too, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
How about you, Alyson? You also mentioned courage. So what are your thoughts about this?
No, I'll try not to take too much time so everyone else has a go. But to me, courage is about, courage and bravery seem to be used interchangeably. And as they say, bravery is not about not having fear. Bravery is about having the fear, but stepping outside the fear. So to quote the Susan Jeffers book, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's kind of what courage is. And the word courage comes from Latin locor, which is the heart. So having courage is when you're coming from your heart, not from your head. Speaking your truth, being who you truly are in the face of criticism and condemnation, in the face of maybe the government, because other people I was thinking about, like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, they had the courage, and Nelson Mandela, despite being put down by his oppressors, he embraced them. That takes courage, right? Courage is not just about fighting battles with force and physical strength. It's about having the ability to forgive. That's a big part of courage. And sometimes we need to forgive ourselves. And Mahatma Gandhi took on a whole freaking empire, pardon my language, whole empire, just through peaceful means. So these are the people who actually have the courage of their convictions. And there's something else I was going to say. Oh, Marianne Williamson, and Katerina alluded to this too. That beautiful poem about by Marianne Williamson. When you have I'm paraphrasing, forgive me, it's such a beautiful thing. I don't want to, mangle it. But it's basically when you have the courage to step into your own light and shine your own light, you give others the permission and the courage to do that. So be a shining light for everyone to see who you are and what you stand for, gives them power, gives them example, gives them courage that they too can do the same. There's a lovely thing on YouTube about being a leader where one guy stands up, he's doing something weird, and everybody's looking at him like, what are you doing, you weirdo? And then someone comes to join him and then starts doing the same thing. And then more people join till finally it's then people who are not joining in look out of place. So if we can have the courage to be that person who stands up and does the weird thing while everybody's looking, and then have, but even more importantly, be the second one who will make the leader seem normal, then that is courage. And I said I wasn't going to talk for a long time, and I have, so I'll pass on now.
Thank you for that. So Roger, does vulnerability lead to courage and confidence to live a freedom lifestyle? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I've asked that question for so long, and I would always think about it with my clients. And then years ago, my great inspiration was I happened to hear a little speech from the actor Jim Carrey. If any of you know who he is, he's been, he's a comedian. He's really funny. He's done all these crazy things. And if you see some of his earlier things, you think, how does this guy have the ability to just have all this freedom and do all of these? And then but he's so brilliant at the same time. And if you listen to him, he is so aware. And then one time he decided he was going to write himself a check for, millions of dollars, because he knew he was going to make that. And he just wrote the check, and he was just going to wait for it to happen. He went about living his life. And then he said, at the end, to give everybody some understanding of this, he says, the problem with most people is they don't want to be seen. The best line ever. They don't want to be seen. And that's really it, because when we move into our authentic selves, depending on the programming that we've had, what we've been told, how we grew up, we will think, no, we don't want anyone to see the real us. So then it becomes difficult to become vulnerable. And then we have to understand that, well, wait a minute, everybody's doing the same thing. Just understand that you can change it when you start changing your thoughts, because that's how we create everything, our lives and our world or whatever. We're creating through energy, and the energy is in our thoughts. And we are the ones who have to decide, okay, we're going to take control of this and begin to change our thoughts to create something different. And that would be becoming vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And then, but proven by Jim Carrey, and it leads to success because he's made all the money now.
Right. Thank you. Yes, that makes total sense. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Pamela? Your thoughts?
Thanks. I just want to thank everyone for sharing their wisdom. I've got so much in my head, and I don't remember exactly what you said, Alyson, but one thing, what occurred to me is, I think it's Lisa Nichols, I might be saying it wrong, but she had this talk about everybody wants you to dim your light. Like, it kind of like what I call it is follow the herd. Do marketing for your business this way. You need to get married. You need to go to college. You need to, you follow the herd. And so she's talking about everyone dimming her light. And at the end of this talk, she, says, well, you need to put on your sunglasses because I'm going to shine my light. And I love that, because that's what happens when you're vulnerable and you're yourself and you follow your intuition and you're like, this is who I am. It takes courage to do that. But I also want to say it takes such freedom, and as an author, I remember so long I wanted to write a book, and you hear so many people, almost everybody on the planet wants to write a book, but it takes courage to do it, because there's steps. It takes courage to be yourself. With the book, you have to write, you have to edit, you have to get an editor to look at it, you have to take criticism. There's so many steps that you need to do to be yourself. And that's with your healing, because it's really hard to heal, for people to heal, if they won't look at their stuff. When you have, and I've done this, point my finger, and I got 3 fingers pointing back at me, and my clients will do that. And really, you need to be vulnerable, look at you, say, how did this event in my past affect my life, and how can I get over it and go forward? And that takes courage. Looking at yourself is very vulnerable. It can be very painful, and then you have to change it, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I see this about myself. I'm doing it again, and want to beat myself up. Oh no, I'm doing it again. But it's like, okay, I'm being vulnerable, love myself, and go forward. So there is a lot of freedom. And just lastly, and I mentioned my gray hair before, but it took me 3 years to grow out my hair. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm like half and half, half gray, half, it took a long time, and it was a lot of vulnerability, and it took a lot of courage. But at the end, what was the freedom? I didn't have to dye my hair anymore. I saved money. I didn't have to travel. Okay. I was finally myself, because I, like you, Reshma, I know I just messed up your name. I
No
never
problem.
wanted to dye my hair, and it's
Yeah.
healthier than it's ever been before,
Yeah.
and I'm in myself. So anybody out there who wants to be vulnerable and wants to do something, and even if you don't want to be vulnerable, but you want to do something, okay, go for it. Have the courage, find safe people to walk you through. And I'm going to say, have a higher source, higher power, God, goddess, whatever you want to call, to hold your hand and go forward, because there's so much freedom at the end.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes. And speaking of freedom, Pamela, what does inner freedom mean to you?
I'm sorry, inner freedom?
Inner or outer freedom, whichever you want to speak on.
I'm going to say it's being who you are and living life on your terms. That's what it is. As I mentioned earlier, not following the herd. Okay. And I want to say there's nothing wrong with the herd. If that's where people want to be, I kind of want to say moo, but if you want to moo or neigh or oink with everybody else, you can do that. Okay. But the inner freedom is just being like, this is who I am. And, some people, and I've seen it with clients and stuff, and sometimes what happens when you start being yourself is a lot of people go away. Okay. And, and it's painful to people you've known for years, and it's like they go away, and it's like, I feel so lonely. But what happens is people who love and accept you for yourself, and it might only be 2 or 3, okay, will start coming into your life and loving you for who you are. Okay. And being with somebody, who you're free to be yourself with is worth the wait. It's worth being alone. And for myself, I dated a lot. I couldn't find Mr. Right. Okay. I couldn't find my other half. And finally, I wrote a list. What do I want? And the number one thing was to accept me for who I am. Because to me, that's freedom. That's inner and outer freedom. And it took a long time, but I found someone. Or should I say, he was brought into my life because I accepted I'm not going to have somebody unless they accept me for who I am. And I don't have to change who I am. Okay. And it was worth the wait. So whether it's a soulmate or it's, your career, or just, being like Roger said, like Jim Carrey, just being yourself, it's worth it. To me, that's freedom.
Yes.
So, thanks. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
So,
you.
Roger, how about you? What does inner or outer freedom mean to you, or anything about freedom?
It's peace.
It's peace.
It's just peace. It's just that you find that place where you have accepted yourself and you feel this sense of empowerment. Doesn't matter what's going on with someone else. You just understand that you're on your journey. And that can take a while to get there. And I can say that because it took me a while to get there, and I'm still doing it, which is the other thing we come to understand. Like I said, I had so many different careers, but then I kind of kept moving to the next one. And every time I moved, it was terrifying. Every time I switched, I thought, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I'm really scared out of my mind, but I'm going to still do it. And that is the thing that will get us to that place of finally accepting who we are, doing the work that we want to do, because we're supposed to enjoy it and have fun and all of that, working with the right people for doing the work like many are here are doing. But it is, we know when we get there, because there's a different level of acceptance and peace that we start to experience within ourselves. And that's the ultimate goal, I think.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. How about you, Katrina?
Well, I have
Your
to agree with
thoughts?
Roger with the inner peace. I found after 30 odd years of my journey that having ease and grace, or having peace, having a moment where everything goes really quiet and you just stay with yourself, you just feel your energy vibrating around you, you know, like tingles or whatever. And it's that peacefulness that tells you that you're on your right track, and you don't have to be loud about it. Just be quiet, just go within. That's the freedom, right? Not having boundaries, understanding that you are capable of anything you want at that given moment, no matter what it is. And if you're afraid, great, because that's kicking up the butt to get you up and going sometimes too. So it's not always a negative thing. And that's where the freedom is to be able to sit with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, say, I love you, I surrender, and we've got this, no matter what's going on around you. And if you can do that just for 5 minutes in one day, you'll find that it'll just increase. Freedom is when you eventually understand that no matter what you're doing, it's going to take you to the next step, and that you agree to give yourself permission to love yourself even more. No matter what anybody else says, it doesn't matter really. Everybody's projecting us. We're all projecting ourselves. And that's why there's so much chaos in the world, because we're all trying to unravel it at the same time, right?
Yes.
So that's the freedom. And freedom from what? We've always been free. You just have to understand that and finally realize that in that quiet moment, you're free, because nothing can touch you in that quiet moment. So I really agree with the quiet stuff, because it does work. You know, look in the mirror and just love yourself even more. That's the freedom. So if you can do that, you can get through anything.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for that. And Alyson, how about you? Your thoughts about freedom, inner freedom, outer freedom?
Yeah, so there's so much gold in what everybody has shared already, and I agree with what's been said. And freedom is really only about you. It's not about anybody else. So whether it's about letting your hair be gray, or whether it's about saying your truth, and doesn't matter what anybody else has to say about that. It's really just about not needing validation or affirmation from anybody else, just being at peace with who you are for yourself. And I agree with Katrina. My rule of thumb is, if I can look in the mirror and say, you know what, Alyson, you're not perfect, but I like you, that's enough for me. Because for me, liking is much harder than loving. Because to be liked, for me anyway, it has to really there are lots of people I've loved that I haven't particularly liked, and I've just loved them because we were related or what have you. But in terms of liking, that's about respect. That's about who, for me, it's who I am as a person. Am I living in alignment with my values? Am I speaking my truth? Am I walking my talk? Am I being who I want to be? Am I being who I would like others to be? Am I being an example rather than being a hypocrite? So it's all about the things that being comfortable with myself, as Katrina was saying, and even Roger, being comfortable with myself, being at peace with myself, and knowing that it doesn't matter what the world thinks about me. The only opinion of me that matters is mine. And that's not to say that the rest of the world doesn't matter to me. They do. Because, John Donne in the 16th century said, no man is an island. We all need each other. That's why connection is one of the core human needs. We need to be connected with each other. But the connection with other people needs to be healthy for us and healthy for them. It's not about having to live up to their expectations of us. It's about living up to our expectations of ourselves. That's true freedom, because when we don't, that's when we have, when we're out of alignment with who we are, that's when we lose our freedom. That's when we feel tied to someone else's opinion or what have you, or standards. And that's change. That's enslavement. And that's not what freedom is. Freedom is about being, and I'm sort of repeating myself, it's just about being free to be yourself without worrying about what other people think about you.
Right. Yes, that's beautiful. Yes. And that's what, when I wrote my book, people reached out to me on Facebook and they're like, you're so vulnerable, you're so brave, you're so courageous to write a book. And I was like, isn't everybody like that? Like, what's the big deal? And I came to know that no, and people struggle with this thing. And that's how my whole Flourish with Freedom began, because I was a financial coach and I was like, people need help with more than just finances. And that's how my whole holistic approach started. But so, is vulnerability a skill set that can be developed with practice? And can you please share a tip with our audience, Alyson?
So before we go there, I just wanted to say, Reshma, I forgot to say it before, is, you know, your title there, Flourish with Freedom, that's what freedom is all about. It's about flourishing, you know, with who we are and being comfortable with who we are. And sorry, what was the question you asked?
Is vulnerability a skill set that can be developed with practice? And can you please share a tip with our audience?
Absolutely, vulnerability is a skill set that not only can be practiced, I think it needs to be learned, because as we were saying before, we are actually taught not to be vulnerable. We're taught to judge others as well as judge ourselves. So we need to unlearn all that so we can learn to be vulnerable. And the easiest way to be vulnerable is to first stop the judgment. Well, it's not easy to do, but stop the judgment is one way. Have compassion. Compassion is probably the starting point. You know, have compassion for other people, have compassion for ourselves. I think when we do that, then we're less likely to be judgmental. We're more likely to be accepting and forgiving, because forgiving is also a really hard thing to do. So compassion, I think, is the first step with, you know, being open to vulnerability, your own as well as other people. And I love what Pamela said about making sure that you only share your vulnerability with people you trust, till you get to a point with freedom where you don't really care what anybody else thinks, because you are just being who you are, and that's all that matters. So
Right.
thank you.
Right. Yeah, I had made notes about that. Not giving too much information or being naive about what you share, where people will not take advantage of you. Yeah. So setting boundaries is equally important, to know what to share, what not to share, how you can impact, how your story can impact people, but not giving all sorts of crazy information. So Pamela, how about you? Is vulnerability a skill set that can be developed with practice or can be taught? And can you please share a tip with our audience?
Well, first, when you mentioned boundaries, I just want to say it takes courage to make boundaries. Okay, it really does. But it's also being vulnerable, and it's also having freedom. Okay, so boundaries are very important. Can vulnerability be a skill set? I believe we all have the ability, but like so many things in our lives, we were taught to cover it, you know, like our intuition, don't be sad, don't be angry, everything else. So I want to say, yes, it's a skill set, but it's also relearning in a sense, if that makes sense. As far as a tip, you know, again, I think part of being vulnerable and relearning it is, first of all, be vulnerable around people who you can trust. All right, that's the first step. That's the way to learn it. And then get to the point, as Alyson was saying, where you don't care what other people think of you. But I have to say that especially as a woman, it took me decades to get to that point. And I watch other people, and it takes them, and there's still a part of you that's going to care what other people think of you, because people are mirrors. All right. So one way that you can look, one tip I can say about vulnerability as a skill set, is to think of everybody as a mirror of you. So what's ever going on within you, okay, they're mirroring it back to you. And what's ever going on in them, you're mirroring it back to them. I hope that makes sense. that were,
Yes.
okay, you've seen some people. So that I think is a way of helping, being vulnerable. Everyone is your mirror and you are everyone else's mirror.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So since we started a little late, Josette has to go. So I will ask Josette to do her piece, and then we will go to Katerina and Roger for her tip. And Josette, you could also give a tip if you like.
Oh, thank you so much, Reshma. Okay, well, if you want to go ahead and finish up with the panel, that's fine, because then I can just wrap up everything and it'll be nice and neat, if that's okay.
Yeah,
So-
but you said you have to go in
I'm okay.
1
You're
minute.
okay.
Okay.
You're
Yeah,
fine.
so we are
Yeah,
just
thank you
wrapping
for,
up. Okay.
for checking on me, though. Thank you.
Okay. So, Katerina, how about you? Is vulnerability a skill set that can be developed with practice or taught? And can you please share a tip with your audience, with our audience, I mean?
Okay. Well, I feel that we're all where we should be at any given moment. So if you need to feel vulnerable at that moment, just I encourage you to be vulnerable. Is it a skill set? Well, we're all learning, aren't we? We're all learning how to expand on what we already have. We do the unraveling so we can find out more clarity and understanding. The skill set really is all about finding the freedom to be the best human being you can be at that given moment, really. I think vulnerability, courage, strength, determination, you all have it. You just got to give yourself permission to find it and work out how it works for you. And then that will give you the freedom. And yes, sometimes you got to swallow your pride and get that mentor or go and have that session or, sit in front of the mirror. The vulnerability I feel too is just embrace your imperfections. So when somebody throws them at you, you're not in a heap you haven't fallen into a heap, and you understand that you are imperfect, but your perfection is the ability to be vulnerable and speak your truth.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And Alyson, thank you for being here. And I know you have to go. So thank
my
you.
apologies. Thanks, Reshma. So I
No
just had the class and I didn't realize that there's a clash. So thanks,
No.
everyone. Lovely to meet you all and love the discussion. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Roger, last but not the least. So
Thank you.
Is vulnerability a skill set that can be developed with practice or taught? And can you please share
Yes.
a tip with our audience?
I'll read something. I'm a little different because I received, I started automatic writing many years ago, and all of the guidance that I would receive would come through that. And so I would receive it like we all do, but then I'd have to study it, and then I'd have to have it make sense to me. So then we begin to understand that we are all developing in the same way, using our minds, using all of that. But I started to feel weird. Like so many people said, I feel strange. I'm different. And this is what's making me, it's challenging for me to accept that. So I received a message and I'll read it to you. So it might help everyone else. Because this is how I kind of get everything. You are weird, normal, and perfect. And when you accept that fact, everything you desire will be delivered to you. You were struck by a comment that caused you to question some of your actions in the past. The judgment that was made had you think you were indeed weird because you did things only to be able to experience love. Now, then this is normal because that is innately who you are and have always been. You always knew, even if only unconsciously, that the power of love or that experience and state of being would cause you to feel powerful because there is no higher power than that. So now you will see all of you is perfect. So decide to accept and embrace you fully. That was the message. That was about 2017 or many years ago. So that's it. It's just accepting that we are that unique individual and we're going to feel weird sometimes and love that. That's it.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So thank you everybody for being on this panel, and Josette, you could
Oh.
take over.
Yes, well, I would like to just thank everyone as well, because what a beautiful, beautiful conversation this was. And for those of you out there watching either live or on the replay, these are the types of discussions that our sacred community loves to have, where it's engaging, and you can see the wealth of wisdom that is just collected on this panel. And each of our panel members are handpicked for our topics, so that we provide, just pour into you with, wisdom and information that helps you further yourself along your own path. So if you're interested in following any of our panelists, please look at the links below. We have all of their links to access them, and you can get in touch with any one of the panelists here, including Reshma, our beautiful facilitator. And if you are interested in finding out more about our sacred community, you can find us at oursacredcommunity.com. We'll also have a link below. And you can join this community for just 15 Australian dollars a month. And to start off, just to see how you like it, you get the first 14 days for only $1 Australian dollar. So this gives you access to numerous experts. And we are, again, a beautiful community whose mission is to empower men and women around the planet. So we thank you for coming and joining us in our Inspire, Innovate, Ignite. These are conversations that count. And I'd like to thank everyone who has participated on the panel. And thank you, Reshma, for facilitating. Beautiful job. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you so much, Josette. Thank you, everybody, for coming.